What's going on, everyone? My name is Liam DeBoer. I'm here with ET Transport, and today we're going to take a deep dive into an American truck manufacturing company that was founded in 1923, Kenworth. Over the course of this video, we'll recap how the company came to be and where they plan on going. So let's get into it. The origins of Kenworth can be traced back to 1912 with its roots in Portland, Oregon. However, at this time, the truck manufacturer was known as Gerlinger Motors, which was an automotive dealership owned by brothers George and Louis Gerlinger. 2 years into their business adventure, the Gerlinger brothers decided to expand into vehicle manufacturing by unveiling and marketing a truck they named the G6. This truck was framed with a structural steel and intended for commercial use. The name G6 was imagined by joining the Gerlinger name with the engine type, an inline 6-cylinder engine, which at the time was revolutionary. The G6 was thought of mostly as a side project for the Gerlinger brothers, but they quickly saw a market in heavy-duty construction as the truck was in high demand from loggers in the Northwest. At the young age of 4, Gerlinger Motors relocated from Portland, Oregon to Tacoma, Washington, and took out a lease on a building from Seattle businessman Edgar K. Worthington. Although it could be perceived as a premature move because just a year later, in 1917, Gerlinger Motors filed for bankruptcy and was put up for sale. E.K. Worthington and his business partner, Captain Frederick Kent, saw an opportunity they couldn't pass up and decided to acquire Gerlinger Motors. However, what the Gerlinger brothers saw as a side project, truck manufacturing, Kent and Worthington saw as the light at the end of the tunnel. In order to emphasize their new company's connection with truck manufacturing, the two businessmen decided to rename their new acquisition the G6 Motor Company. The company got off to a strong start, and by 1922, G6 was producing 53 trucks a year. Following the continued strong demand for the model line, the G6 Motor Company realized in the pursuit of growing their business even more, the biggest obstacle they faced was its limited factory space. Kent and Worthington decided to double down on their investment and sunk $60,000 into reincorporating and relocating its headquarters. Now, this may not seem like a substantial investment for a business that is operating successfully, but keep in mind, $60,000 in 1922 is the equivalent purchasing power of roughly $995,000 today. A year later, in January of 1923, the owners Kent and Worthington decided to reincorporate G6 Motor Company and combine their names to create the moniker Kenworth Motor Truck Company. Contrasted to car manufacturers at the time, Kenworth was taking a different approach to manufacturing by abstaining from assembly lines and instead constructing their vehicles in individual bays. One of the practices the company is still well known for today, which is building vehicles to customer specification, was introduced at this time as well. Let's fast forward just 3 years to 1926 when Kenworth decided to expand its product line. However, this wasn't an addition of a new truck, but rather introduced the company's first bus. By 1927, Kenworth had increased its production from 2 vehicles a week to 3, and in that same year expanded internationally by opening its first manufacturing plant in Canada, which was an attempt to avoid import taxes while selling to their customers in the north. 1929 would mark the year that E.K. Worthington retired. Instead of bringing in a partner to replace him, Harry Kent became the president of the company solely. Between the sales of the buses and trucks, Kenworth once again had to relocate to a larger factory within Seattle in order to accommodate the increased demand. At this point in time, the company was in good financial health, but with the onset of the Great Depression, Kenworth saw a substantial decline in new vehicle sales and a high rate of vehicle loan defaults, which forced the company to adapt. In 1932, Kenworth produced its first fire truck, which was adapted from its commercial truck. These fire engines proved to be a good decision for the company as they were among the most heavy-duty fire engines of the time and supplemented Kenworth's revenue enough to keep the company afloat. At this point in time, diesel engines started becoming the standard as diesel fuel cost a third of the price of gasoline, and its increased fuel mileage and dependability rendered gasoline engines next to obsolete within the heavy-duty vehicle market. Over the next few years, Kenworth would go through an extensive redesign of its entire truck line. In 1935, the Motor Carrier Act was passed, which introduced new size and weight restrictions within the trucking industry in the United States. From this forced innovation came the Model 516, the company's first cab-over truck, as well as the Tandem Axle 346, which was introduced in 1937. However, these weren't the biggest changes to the company in that year. Harry Kent passed away in 1937, leaving Philip Johnson as the company president. In 1939, Kenworth introduced its 500 series trucks, which would form the basis of its commercial truck line, which would be carried into the mid-1950s. By the end of the 30s, the economy was starting to bounce back, which brought with it a demand for trucks once again. Because of this, Kenworth ended up producing an impressive 226 trucks in the year 1940. This brings us to the most important time period for all truck manufacturers in America, the onset of World War II. Like every other manufacturer, Kenworth converted to war production and started supplying the Army with 4-ton 6x6 M1 recover vehicles. In 1943, Kenworth became a supplier for Boeing and started manufacturing components for both the B-17 and B-19 bombers. In total, the company would supply the Army with 1,930 wreckers by the end of World War II, which forced Kenworth to introduce assembly line manufacturing in order to produce the vehicle quick enough to keep up with the extensive increase in demand. In 1944, President Phil Johnson died, leaving the company to be split between his wife and the widow of Harry Kent and one other company director. However, these three weren't interested in the ownership and planned on offering ownership of the company to the employees, but the financing for that offer was never completed. This is when Pacific Car and Foundry Company, better known of today as PACCAR, purchased Kenworth and made the company a subsidiary of their own. By 1950, Kenworth's customer base had grown far and wide, marketing vehicles across the western half of the United States and nearly 30 countries worldwide. Over the next few years, the company would introduce the Model 801, an earth-moving dump truck, which was the first cab-beside-engine configuration. The 900 series was introduced with an all-new drop-frame chassis, with the CSE cabover being replaced by the K-series COE. Seeing as the demand for Kenworth vehicles was high in both the construction and mining industry as well as the over-the-road trucking industry, the company decided to end its bus production and sold the rights to its product line. It was in 1958 that PACCAR decided to have Kenworth become a sister company to one of their other brands, Peterbilt, and to expand its sales base by establishing facilities in Mexico. In the 1960s, Kenworth would undergo a substantial revision of its commercial truck line. The company debuted the W900 and the K900, which was later renamed the K100. The W and K model prefixes were decided by the company as a way to pay homage to the company founders Worthington and Kent. The W900 was the first redesign of the Kenworth conventional cab since 1939, which brought into fruition a standard tilting hood for the W series, with the K series receiving a taller cab and doors. To meet increased demands for the new products, Kenworth opened a new assembly facility in Kansas City in 1964. Over the next 2 years, Kenworth nearly doubled its yearly truck sales, which drove the company to once again expand internationally by establishing Kenworth Australia, which would develop right-hand drive trucks in Melbourne, Australia. In 1976, the company launched a flagship customization series, the VIT, an abbreviation for Very Important Trucker. This series introduced a high level of interior features such as its skylight windows in the Aerodyne sleeper cab, which was the first factory-produced sleeper cab with stand-up headroom. These cabs were implemented in both the W900 and the K100 series. In 1982 and 1984 respectively, the W900 and K100 underwent their most substantial revisions, becoming the W900B and the K100E. While the only visual distinction between the new and old versions was the adoption of rectangular headlamps, the updates were centered around upgrading fuel economy, road handling, and reliability. Throughout the 1990s, the company introduced the T300, the first Kenworth medium-duty conventional truck, as well as the T2000, a next-generation aerodynamic conventional. In 1998, PACCAR, parent company to Kenworth, purchased British truck manufacturer Leyland Trucks and Dutch manufacturer DAF Trucks, which started developing COE trucks under the Kenworth and Peterbilt banner. In 2006, Kenworth would unveil the K500, the largest COE ever produced by the company. This truck was developed primarily for off-highway applications by combining the chassis of the heavy-duty C500 and their COE cab. Throughout the 2010s, the company would continue making upgrades to its T, W, and K model lines. Now, this brings us to the present day. In 2021, Kenworth announced 3 model lines of electric vehicles, with the K270E, K370E, and the T680E, all of which are powered by battery electric powertrains. The company announced the T680F, which is powered by a Toyota hydrogen fuel cell, has 6 hydrogen tanks, and a driving range of over 300 miles with a full load of 80,000 pounds. That being said, Kenworth has not taken an aggressive stance on electric vehicles and hasn't hinted at turning away from diesel trucks like some of the other manufacturers. The company plans to continue working with Toyota in the hydrogen fuel cell powertrains, however, has clearly stated they have no interest in designing the infrastructure for hydrogen fuel production like other companies such as Nikola, and has instead decided to partner with Shell. Well, that's all for me, folks. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Where does Kenworth rank in your favorite truck manufacturers? Let us know in the comments below. If you did enjoy this video, we've done others like them on companies such as Cummins, Detroit Diesel, and CAT, which you can find on our channel as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe below to keep up with new content, and we'll catch you next time.